Welcome to Expositions. I'm Kevin Rhodes. Everyone wants to make a difference in some way. This is the most cited reason why people go into politics, journalism, the sciences, and many other professions. They want to make a difference. It also seems to be the stated aspiration in just about every valedictory address given in the history of mankind. We want to make a difference. And this is appropriate. It gives our lives focus and meaning beyond self, which is healthy and right. However, when people are left on their own to just choose any cause, they can make some interesting choices. Worldliness sets in, and we end up with people focusing their entire existence on causes that are ungodly, completely earthly, or sometimes total nonsense. People can exaggerate the meaning of a cause they care about in a sad effort to give their own lives greater meaning. But in the closing chapter of the book of Ruth, we find a man who had his priorities in order and who made a big difference as a result. So as we look and see what Ruth was all about, as Ruth had left Moab, her home, with her mother-in-law to go back to Bethlehem, Judah, and to then at that time work in the fields from chapter 2 of Ruth, to be noticed by Boaz, to then seeing that he was a near relative that Naomi saw, to have an audience with him, essentially requesting that he marry her. And that brings us to chapter 4, where we find Boaz going through the process of checking with all the city leaders, those in that area where they would have met, and going and meeting the other man who was actually first in line and having a discussion. And as a result of that discussion, we find that Boaz found a way that he could marry Ruth. Boaz had previously shown an appreciation for the instruction regarding care for the poor in Deuteronomy 15, and he was now following the law of redemption that's found in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 23 through 28. Including even respecting the right of redemption of the near kinsman, as Jeremiah also mentions in Jeremiah 32, verses 6 through 12. But the attention he gave to the problem, to Ruth and Naomi, and to all that followed, showed a heart determined to make a difference in the best way possible. So as we consider Ruth chapter 4, we want to notice what it really means from a spiritual point of view, though this is also a very practical and beautiful love story of what it means and how you can go about making a difference. The first thing we want to note is found in the first 10 verses of chapter 4. And it is this: make a difference by the choices you make. We read, "Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, 'Come aside, friend, sit down here.' So he came aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, 'Sit down here.' So they sat down. Then he said to the close relative, 'Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you.' And he said, 'I will redeem it.' Then Boaz said, 'On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance.' And the close relative said, 'I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it.' Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm anything, one man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Therefore the close relative said to Boaz, 'Buy it for yourself.' So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, 'You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's, from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day. We define our own lives by the choices we make or the choices we refuse to make. For instance, in Hebrews 11:24 and 25, it says, by faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Moses made a choice to stand with God and with his people. And it's that same principle that we see Boaz making a choice and standing by it. But notice what he did and the way in which he approached this. And in a practical way, it is very helpful. Put yourself in a position to change things. If you're going to really make a difference, you have to put yourself in a position to change things. And that's what he did when he went up to the gate and sat down there. Boaz knew where to go, where there would be this meeting of the minds, where the elders of the city, essentially the city fathers would go, and this would include his near relative. He knew where to go. He says, this is what I've got to do to have a meeting that includes both this man and that I can have others as witnesses. Then it says in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, the king said to me, what do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. Now notice what's happened in both these situations. You see two men who put themselves in a position to actually change things. They recognized that they wanted to make a difference. They had to be where they could. And a lot of times that's what we have to do. We have to decide to put ourselves in that position, and that requires a lot of work sometimes that we have to be willing to undergo. But also, he approached people with the right attitude. If you're going to change things, that has to go with it. In the second part of verse 1, it says that Boaz said, come aside, friend, sit down here. So he came aside and sat down. Now that could be just incidental, that was a polite way to speak, but that's partly the point. He approached him the right way, and that set the tone for everything he was going to say. In Colossians 4 and verse 6, it says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. We ought to speak to people in such a way that it puts them in a favorable mindset toward whatever we would have to say, especially when we're trying to reach them with the gospel. When you're trying to make a difference, when you're trying to reach out to someone, you need to create that situation, and how you speak to people is a large part of that. When you're kind and when you're calm, then you can go a long way to help them be kind and calm, and that they will recognize and consider rationally what you have to do if you will rationally present it. But that also leads us to understand what he says in verse 2. Include people to help as much as possible. In some ways, you shouldn't try to do everything on your own. Here, this was both accustomed to bring others into a major decision and so that there were witnesses, but also it made an audience so that the nature of the situation and the decision made would be made with understood of a lot of pressure, and to deal with that and to make it the right way possible. In Acts chapter 9, verse 27, and as an example of this, Barnabas took him, this is Paul, and brought him to the apostles, and he declared to them how he had seen the Lord on the road, and that he had spoken to him, and how he had preached boldly at Damascus in the name of Jesus. Barnabas took the effort to move in and to go so that there was more people there. And it was a group, and therefore there was a stronger effort to hopefully make that choice, which was so important for the benefit of the church. The other thing is you have to do the right thing the right way. If you're making a real kind of difference, this is how you do it. In verses 2 through 4, he goes about the process of talking about it and setting everything up properly, using the field as the example, because that was part of the process. He found the right way to introduce it so that the man would be interested but also appreciate the responsibility, so that he would acknowledge what he had in that relationship, but also then to make sure he approached it in a straightforward way and he wasn't hiding anything, though it was wise how he did this. In Colossians 3 verse 17 it says, "And whatsoever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father by Him." In verses 5 and 6, though, there's a part of this we sometimes miss, and it's you have to take responsibility. That is, if you want this field, if you want something that maybe looks like a financial win for you, you need to realize there's another part of this, a responsibility that, yes, would come with a financial loss. And that is what he's saying here and why he couldn't do it in the end, because this meant he would be splitting up what he had between more than one heir. And so there's responsibility. Anytime, if you're going to make a difference, if you're going to make these choices, you need to understand the responsibility that goes with it. Choose ye this day whom you will serve, whether the God of your father on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whom land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Take responsibility for your decisions. Don't go in rashly and just talk about what you want. Understand the responsibility that goes with it. But when you realize that, act decisively. In verses 7 through 10, Boaz, once that decision was made, he said, "Everyone here heard it. Here's what I'm doing. I'm going to do this." He didn't show any kind of hesitation. There were no ifs, ands, and buts. It was, this is what I'm going to do. In 1 Samuel 17, verse 32, do you think about what David said to Saul when he was going to face Goliath? "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine." There was commitment to it. He was all in. And that's the kind of decisiveness that we need to show if we're going to really make a difference. We have thought it through, we're sure, and we are decisive. And that is the path by which we can make a difference. We must make more of an effort to positively affect the world around us, instead of just reacting to whatever Satan throws against us. But to do that, it means we think through what we're doing and saying, I want righteousness in my life, integrity moving forward, but I'm going to do things that matter. And when we do things following God's will, that's exactly what can happen. And when you do that, you will make a difference. Second of all, you can make a difference in others' lives. And please do not act like that's not a big deal, because it is. In verses 11 through 17, it reads, all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went in to her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a close relative. And may his name be famous in Israel. And may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became a nurse to him. Also the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "There is a son born to Naomi," and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Whenever we consider what it means to make a difference in life, most of all, we should see here, it means making a difference in others' lives. Whenever people talk about making a difference, they tend to focus on big social or political issues. And while this is not wrong, it's the wrong place to begin. If you want to have an impact in life, do things that make a difference in the lives of those around you, the people you already know and love. Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Your behavior, your influence in the people, in the world around you, that can be a very large thing, not just in this world, but in eternity. Make that kind of difference. Seek to bless the lives of those around you, my friends, not only by words, but by deeds. In verses 11 and 12, it says, all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. And may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman. You see, we need to recognize the value of actually doing things that matter, in living in ways that matter. In 1 John 3, verse 18, it says, my brethren, let us love not in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. That it's not just a matter of saying the right thing, but we're really doing the right things for others. In James chapter 1, verse 27, it says, pure religion and undefiled before God the Father is this. And he continues to care for or visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. And that's the kind of attitude we should have moving forward, that we're willing to deal with the problems and act on them, and to help improve people's lives. It may seem like that visit was a small thing, that card was a small thing, kind words, taking time out of your day to go and make sure that you said hello. But you never know how much your words, your time, and your efforts can make a difference in the lives of others. Let's start, though, by thinking about it this way. Make a positive difference in your spouse's life. You see verse 13? So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. This would have been so wonderful for both of them. To this point, Ruth had not been able to have this, even though she'd been married before, and so she now has a child. Boaz was older, and now he has a child. And together, though, we see in them this positive difference they've made for one another. But we should do this even in our behavior one toward another in marriage. Husbands, likewise, dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Make a positive difference in the life of your spouse. Be someone that your spouse is so thankful for because of what you do to benefit them. In Colossians 3, 18 and 19, two short verses but so important. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. That kind of determination, fully applied in marriage, makes sure that each is a blessing to the other. And now, let's move our world out a little bit and think of others in all that you do. In verses 14 through 17 it says, Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel, and may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became a nurse to him. Also the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Think of others in all that you do. To recognize from Philippians chapter 2 and verse 4 that we need to not think just on the things of ourselves, but he says the things of others. Their lives matter too, and we need to make sure that they see it in the way in which we treat them. That is why in everything we do, we need to live to glorify God. In Matthew chapter 5, 14 through 16, it says, Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but upon a candlestick, that it might give light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Live to glorify God. Realize that that is itself a powerful thing to accomplish in life. And it should not go unheeded or unrecognized as if it doesn't matter. It's doing something that is needed more and more in a lightless world in many cases. But in part of this, we need to also provide for others' needs. When there's an opportunity, We can reach out and help someone because they need someone. They need something, and therefore that means they need us. As you therefore have opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10 says. Make sure you make the most of those opportunities. You won't be able to do everything for everyone, certainly, but you can do something for someone. And the more you're able to do that, the more you're having an impact. And because you have an impact, you're making a difference. When you think about this, let's take it back away even from the financial and think of it just in terms of the emotional and the social. Because no matter what you have or do not have, you can always love people fully and dearly. You can always show them how much they matter. In Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12 it says, Therefore, as you would that men should do unto you, do you even also unto them, and so fulfill the law and the prophets. Once you establish this as your guiding principle in life, once you are committed to love your neighbor as yourself, Matthew 22 and verse 39, once you have determined without any question that you're going to love your brethren fully and completely, John 13, 34 and 35, as Christ also loved us. When we love them in this way, then everything else will follow. Because they matter to us so much, we will do everything within our power. That may be simply being there for them, being around them, encouraging them, helping them, serving them in whatever way possible, but certainly loving them. And that's what we need to make sure that we're doing, because that itself makes an impact and it makes a difference in people's lives. We ought to deliberately try to bring joy into people's lives. You know, in Romans chapter 12 and verse 15 it says, Rejoice with them that do rejoice. It would certainly be nice if we would be the source of joy so that we are bringing that joy to them that they might find joy in us. Don't be the person who's always bringing others down, but be that person who's always lifting others up. Bring joy and offer joy into others' lives, because you may be that one ray of sunshine that is there that can make the difference in whether or not their day is dark and gloomy or bright and cheerful. Offer it to them. Do that for them. And serve them well. In Galatians chapter 5 verse 13, it says for us to serve one another out of love. You see, there are all sorts of small things we've mentioned that can accomplish this end. Let's make sure we're fully ready to do it. When you look back on your life, you will remember people who took the time to help, the time to comfort, the time to encourage, and the time to love you. Be that person for others. Thirdly, if you want to make a difference, truly make a difference, then make a difference in the future. Let's look at verses 18 through 22. Now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron, Hezron begot Ram, Ram begot Amminadab, Amminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. Make a difference in the future. We tend to see a genealogy such as this, even something so brief here, as just a list of names. But it's so much more than that. Years ago, a record such as this would have been recorded in the family Bible. So take a moment to think about your own genealogy, just a few generations back, and however many generations forward that you can. Every name that you can recall is special in some way. Whether a great-grandmother whose faith had an impact on your mother, as mine did, or your children and grandchildren, and the hopes you have for their future, because both sides of the genealogy are listed here. This is what we ought to see here at the end of the book of Ruth, because these final verses are why the book of Ruth itself was written. Know what others have done before you to make your situation possible. That's what we see as giving that genealogy going backwards. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase, 1 Corinthians 3 verse 6. And you drop down to verse 10, it reads, according to the grace of God which was given to me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation and another builds on it, but let each one take heed how he builds on it. That is, we realize we've had people go before us who made things possible for us, and we need to do things now to make things possible for others. For our children, yes, but also for those in the Lord and in the local congregation. That means we need to appreciate our own potential. When you think about Daniel and the potential he had as a young man and how his life went to old age, Esther, who in Esther 4 verse 14 accepted that this might have been, as she was told, the reason why she'd come to the kingdom. Or in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9, to see yourself as part of that holy nation and royal generation. When you come together and you're saying, we're special because we're God's. Learn to live, work, and train with future generations in mind. Think about Abraham in Genesis 12 and verse 3, when he was told, in thy seed all nations of the earth shall be blessed. And that he was living at that moment and serving at that moment for something far greater than him, far grander than him, and far down the road from him. And do the same when you read Proverbs 22 verse 6. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it. The way you train your child spiritually may make the difference, probably will make the difference in the souls of many going forward. It is hard to imagine what the future might hold for us, for our children and grandchildren, or for the church. But when we begin to see ourselves as participants in shaping the future, it gives us a purpose and a focus that makes life in Christianity all the more worth living. Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 13. What then is the conclusion of the whole matter? Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole of man. Friends, Boaz made a difference. The choices he made changed the lives of Ruth and Naomi completely. It changed his impact on the community and on the nation. And it ultimately played a role in the scheme of redemption that brought Jesus into this world as the Son of David. And all of this was possible because the character of Boaz was focused on pleasing God. Keep that in mind. No shortcuts, no compromises, no trying to get away from things. He wanted to please God, he obeyed God, but he kept true to his purpose, and in so doing, he made a difference. His example is perfect for us because it shows that we do not have to have a lot of money, get into politics, or spend our lives working for some favorite nonprofit organization to make a difference. We just need to begin making choices that have a real impact because we are more and more focused on pleasing God and helping others than we are ourselves. We can make a difference by changing our interactions with family, friends, and everyone else to focus on meeting their needs, being kind, and pointing them to God. We can make a difference when we see our lives in the light of eternity rather than only in the light of the moment. When we begin to measure our impact in terms of how we help people we know and people we've never met for eternity, it will forever change our lives for the better and will truly make a difference. No one has ever made a greater difference than Jesus Christ, and He is our model for most of all. Jesus came to make it possible for you to spend eternity in heaven. Are you making the choices that will do the same? I'm Kevin Rhodes. Thank you for watching Expositions.